The first thing that we're going to do today is we're going to scrape some political content from Reddit, and we'll do a little bit of text processing as we do that.
Real quick.
Yes.
Micah, do you have this script? Do you know where to get it?
No.
Could Will or Todd, could you link the GitHub?
Yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah. Let me know when there'll be two scripts for today. The first one is called Scraping Reddit Thread, and then the second one is titled Scrape Newspaper Articles. And they do very different things.
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
But yeah, howdy. The first thing that we will do is scrape some political content from Reddit, and then we'll go through the process of scraping newspaper article data from ProQuest. And we'll do it in the way that pretty much everybody in our department actually goes through that, by downloading a CSV of stable links and then using those stable links to access the actual content and the actual text of the newspaper articles. But yeah, so the first thing that we'll do is the Reddit one. So if you can open up the scraping Reddit thread code. First, we'll do our little import statement. And just to talk a little bit about what each of these things are. So RE is a package for regular expressions, which is a method of text processing. And it lets you do some pattern recognition with text. NumPy is, we don't actually quite get around to using that today, but it is a package in Python that you can do some math stuff with and some work with data with. And then Pandas, which we import as PD, is another data management and analysis software. And it's basically a fancy spreadsheet system. And then we are familiar with Selenium. And then finally, we import datetime, which lets us work with dates. And it's very useful for actually dealing with time, which can be a little tricky if you are doing this in R or something else. The date objects in Python are very, very simple to work with. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to define our Chrome profile again. We will actually be downloading articles today. So make sure you know what the link here is, your download default directory. Change this for your computer and make sure you know where that is, because that's where the articles will actually download to on your computer. And then we will start up Chrome. Get this open over here. All right, so now that Chrome is open, I figured last time we looked at some information that was a little trivial. It was office chair reviews. So this time, instead, we're going to look at some political content. And we're going to look at Reddit again, because Reddit is a very big internet community, and it is primarily text-based. I wanted to pick a community that wasn't extremely fast-moving. If it moves too fast, it can be really hard to keep track of code and how it works and to make sure that it actually works. So I picked one that was a little slower, and it is a community called Kotaku in Action. It's sort of a weird little community. It's not that little, actually. But it was founded in the early to mid 2000s around a social movement called Gamergate. And it's focused on political issues in video games. And the really minute details are beyond the scope of today, but it's seen as potentially an origin for some of the alt-right activity that we saw sort of emerging towards now, where a lot of the sort of internet gamer types started to get really political. And Gamergate is seen as sort of a starting point for some of that. So we are going to go to the Kotaku in Action page. And we are going to cross our fingers and hope that nothing super weird popped up here. It's Reddit, so you never know. Reddit political communities can get weird. So fingers crossed. And what we're going to do here is we're going to start, not finish, but we're going to start the process of selecting all of the threads or the top threads on this page. And then we'll go to the thread, and then we'll scrape the comments from it. And then after that, we'll save it to a pandas data frame. We can only really get to the first thread here, this one at the top, because the text processing part can actually be really labor intensive to make it really work well. But we'll go through the start of it. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to find the top threads on the page. And we're going to call that variable Kia page so that we know exactly what the variable is. Kotaku in Action page. That finds it by this text here. Anything with data click ID equals body. And we can inspect the page and then find that in the HTML. Let's look for data. ID equals. This was a little weird to find. It's not coming up there, but we found it before, and I know that it works. So this particular XPath seems to get the things that we want. So let's print out all of the links that are in this list, which we can do in this little loop here. That'll print out down here. And what this is going to do is it's going to show us what all of the links that are associated with these elements are. So this first one we can see is a thread for Week Like Megathread Virtual Reality Edition. It's this first thread at the top that's pinned. The second one is the absolute state of Captain Marvel, which is this second one. They seem to be angry about Captain Marvel. After that is an ad. And what's interesting about this is that these ads are set up differently, and they show up as none with the link. They don't actually have a link. They're set up in a different way. So if we're going to actually find all of the threads on this page, we need to deal with that. So what we're going to do is we're going to find all these elements again, because this loop, the way that it works, messes up the actual list structure. So we have to redefine this. So we'll run that again. We'll create an empty list that we can append the working links to and remove ads. And then we're going to loop through the Kia page list, and we're going to filter out all the ads that don't actually have any links in them. We can do that with this little loop right here. And what this is doing is when we sort of see this, how it appears as none. What this loop is doing is if the contents of the list show up as anything other than none, they're included in the list. If they are none, then they are excluded in the list, which is what this little continue thing is. So we're going to run this. And then we get a nice little list of working links, which we can see right there. Just the first one is exactly what we want. If we look through at number 1, that's working. At number 2, that's working. So this gets us a nice list of all of the threads on this page.
Will, can I jump in real quick?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know a lot of folks are trained on Stata. So for anybody who's not super familiar with data management in object-oriented environments, the idea of creating a list is in order to store these hyperlinks within a single area, you need to define where you're storing it, what the variable is and where it's contained. And so creating a list is just a type of array for storing information. It could be numbers, it could be hyperlinks, it could be character strings, it doesn't really matter. And so we're defining the list up front as essentially an empty array, an empty matrix, an empty vector or something, whatever is the easiest way for you to think about it. And then we're looping through it and defining each cell in that array, that list, that vector, that matrix, whatever, to contain the hyperlink. And so that's all that's happening here is we're defining the matrix, the data frame, the vector, and then we're filling it with the hyperlinks.
Yeah, and the sort of another important part about that is that this is stable. One of the things that we run into when we're scraping the internet like this is things can be really unstable, where over time, if we go back to this page in 2 hours, this list might be different. The links could be different. The top threads could have changed. So the important part about this is if we want to loop through this particular subreddit every day at a particular time, we want to get a snapshot of what at that time was important on this subreddit. And saving these links is going to tell us what the top threads were at 3:18 p.m. on 11/20/2020, which for sort of data management purposes and ID what we're actually accessing is pretty important to have. But this is a stable list of a snapshot of now. So we can use this list to actually navigate to the threads. So with lists in Python, you can access the different parts of the list with this structure here, where we have working links, which is the variable name, bracket 0 bracket. And what that will do is it gives us the first element in the list. Python starts at 0 instead of 1, which can be very annoying if you have either taken a break from Python and don't remember that, and then you just start your loops at 1 and then consistently miss the first element in it, or if you are just starting Python, because it's a little unintuitive at the start that it starts at 0. So if you are iterating through your list, it always starts at index 0. But what we can do is if we print out working list 0, we'll just get a link. And we can use the driver.get function and just go to that link. So this will bring us to the first thread on the page, which is this one that is pinned by the moderators. It's a little hard to read when it's that small, so I'll open it up. So this is what the thread looks like. It's a bunch of text. We have the user names up here. This is the original post. If we scroll down, we see all of these comments on it. And we see that we're actually going to have to click this button to see the whole discussion. So the first thing that we're going to do is figure out how to expand that. But before that, really even, oh wait, here it is. So one thing that I'm actually going to do today is sort of show you what part of the workflow of this can look like. So instead of just showing you only things that work, I'm going to show you some of the process of figuring out how things sometimes don't work. So the first thing that we really want to think of is like, okay, we want to click this button up here. This scrolled way down for some reason. So we will inspect it. And when we inspect it, we see that there is, here's the HTML. It is a button with the roll button, which is pretty intuitive. So what we'll try to do is find this element based purely on that, which we can do with this code here. So we define test button just to see if it works as a button element with the role titled button. And we are going to find all of the elements on the page that have this HTML in them. We're going to check how many of those are with this statement right here, length test button, because what this will do is this will give us a list. If there are multiple things that match this HTML, it'll give us a list of all of them. So if we check the length of the list, we can see how many there are. And if this is not unique, then we know we're probably going to run into problems down the line. We want something that's a unique identifier that's going to be stable over time. And if we do that, we can see that there's 5 of them. So that's probably not the best way to identify this. There were a few other ones that I looked at that didn't work, and I ended up going with a slightly more complicated way of identifying this button. So if we look at it again, you can see that the button has, inspect. Where did that go? Here. This button has this text on it. View entire discussion, 19 comments. And this is going to change depending on the Reddit thread you're in. This could say 300 comments. It could say 1,000 comments, but they're all going to say view entire discussion. So we can actually identify this button based on that. But the code to do that is a little more complicated. So we're going to find it by XPath again. We're going to find a button on this page that contains the text view. And if we do that, I believe this might be the only one. Check. Yes. So that is the only button on this page that we can see at all that has the word view in it. And this should be pretty stable over different threads and on different pages, which means it's a pretty good one to use. So we can use this and we can click on it. So we will find this. We will redefine it as something that's a little bit easier to remember, something that actually describes what the element or what the variable represents. So we'll call it all discussion, and then we'll click on it. And then that will open up all of the other sort of top level comments of this Reddit thread. So that's sort of step one. Step two that we really need to do is we need to find the web element that holds this entire first thread. So if we maximize this again, and we inspect this, you can see that as you highlight different parts of the HTML, different parts of the page light up. And the tools that Todd showed you sort of go through this process. And what you can see is that if you scroll down a little bit, this stops at some point. Let's do this. Here we go. Where was that? There we go. So you can see that if you highlight this particular HTML, it only highlights part of this page, which is really good because if we search through the code that's contained in that particular part, we're not going to get any of the other more posts from the Kotaku in Action community. We're not going to get those if we only search through that highlighted portion of code. So we wanted to find something that has all of the comments in it, but not other stuff. So there was a little, there was actually not that much trial and error involved. And the thing that I selected was this horrible CSS selector. Really long, doesn't make a whole lot of sense, nearly impossible to read. And as I picked that, I figured that it probably wouldn't actually work very well and would probably break if we went to a different thread. I also wanted to see if the button identifier would actually work on another page too. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually go to the second link in that list that we defined before. And this will take us to the number 2 thread on the Kotaku in Action page. So we'll check to see if the code that we just figured out is actually going to work on here too. So let's see what this is. This is the Captain Marvel discussion. They are talking about Captain Marvel, and they're pretty angry about comic books, which is a thing that they do. But we see this view entire discussion button again. Let's see if the button that we defined before still works. So we will use the same code. We'll try and click on it. Turns out it does. That's actually pretty stable to the second test. If we went to the third, the fourth, or the fifth, it would still work. Now what we're going to do is we're going to see if this CSS selector still works. And weirdly, even though it's this horrible string, it does seem to still identify that comment section, which is really nice. And if it continues to work, we'll just keep it. But that's a thing that will, once you start to scrape a bunch of different threads, you eventually see if it's stable to all of your links or not. But now that we've seen that these two things actually work in multiple different threads, we'll go back to that first page. And then we're going to reopen the comments again. And then what we're going to do is we're going to start to pull information out of this. There's a couple things that we really want to get out of here. First is we want to separate out the original post from the comments, because that's just sort of qualitatively different. It's if we're interested in political discussions and what the content of these things are, we're going to want to see what starts political discussions and then how people talk about it. So we're going to want to keep track of what's an original post and what replies are. We are going to use this right here, this string. There's a little bit of trial and error in finding this. And it's in a slightly different spot than the comments, but it's not too bad to find. So we'll use this code, find the div element with the data test ID post content that finds this original first post. And within this, what we're going to do is we're going to start looking for the actual content that we want. So what I personally would be interested in here is the user, the username, who posted this, when was this posted. We can see it was posted 8 days ago. We can use that to find the original date. The thread title is a thing that we want to keep track of. And then the actual content of the original post itself. So we are going to use this up here, that original post element, to then find all of the content contained inside of this. First thing that we're going to look for is the username. And if we look at the username here, let's get this open. Inspect that. There we go. There's a couple things that we can try, but what popped out as a thing that's probably in every single username, and if we search down to here too, we can see that it is every username is actually a link. You can click on it, it'll bring you to the user page. And every link has an href, which again is the web page. So this will just take you to that user page. And they all have this little string of code here where it's /user/. So we can use that to find usernames, which is very handy. And that's what we do here. So what we're going to do is we'll use the original post to find the element by XPath. One thing that I want to mention very specifically is when you're using find element by XPath, this period at the very start is actually weirdly important. So if I remove this period, what this is going to do is it's going to look at the entire page. Every single thing on this page is going to be searched. With this period here, it's only going to look at the HTML that is in the original post that we defined above. So we're going to look through, because there's this period here, we're going to find an A element that is within the original post that has an href that contains this string user. And that will give us the original poster's username. And it will give us this variable right here, original post username, which is a web element. And we can get the text that it's connected to by typing original post username.text. There it goes. And that'll give us the original poster's username. This is also a little odd to work with. So what we do is we make sure that it's saved as a string variable, which is text. And it's just dealt with in a very particular way. So string variables are very different than integers or things that you would use for math. Most of what we'll be dealing with here is strings. So we will then save this as original poster. Bingo. So we got the original poster's username. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to find the title. So the original post's title, if we go back to Reddit and then search the HTML, we can see that it is an H1. And H's are headers. So if there's an H1 or an H4, it's a particular type of header. So what we can do is see how many of these are there on the page. I already did that. There's only one. So what we're going to do is we're going to search through the original post's HTML again. We're going to find it by XPath. This period, again, is important. It's here. It's only going to look through the HTML of original post. I'm going to look for this particular H1. There's only one of them. So we are going to save that, again, as the original post title element .text. That will give us the text that's attached to it. Just to point out what it is finding with the .text, it's this part. This sort of white highlighted section, that's the text that's visible, that's connected to this element. So that's what's being extracted by that. And we are going to save it as original post title. And if we print that out, we got the title right here, saved as a nice, easy to work with string. And then the last part up here we're going to look for is the post date. So we're going to do something very similar. We're going to find an A element that's within original post with data click ID equals timestamp, which is probably the only one. Turns out it is. And that will give us a string of the right here, where it says 8 days ago. So that's what we got. So that's useful, but it's not exactly what we want. We want to parse that out. So we're going to use regular expressions to do this. And we'll, I think, get into regular expressions next semester in more detail and talk about them. But the big thing that they do in a basic sense is they can match patterns. So I'm going to use regular expressions to parse this. And I'm going to find where it says 8, find where it says days. But I also, if you see here, allow for this to be many different types of time. It could be years, months, weeks, days, hours, or seconds. It's looking for any of those words. And then ago, the string ago. So I'm going to create a pattern, and then I'm going to match it. And again, the real details of what's happening here, you're probably better suited to looking at the tutorial on regular expressions. But just to show what this is pulling out, so in this little bit of code right here, it found the 8 part of 8 days ago, and then it saved it as a number, which is very useful because we can use that with Python's date tools to subtract it from the current day, and then we can figure out the exact day that this was posted on. So we pull out various parts of this that we can then use to identify all this information that we really want. Lastly, what we're going to find is all of this text here, because we're also interested in the content that they have. What exactly did they post? So if we look at this again, we can see that these are all P elements. And P elements are paragraphs. They're usually, they just contain text. And we'll be looking at P elements, if we have the time to do that, later with the ProQuest example. But they just contain text, which is nice and easy to deal with. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at this chunk of code up here, the original post. We're going to find all of the P elements in this chunk of code. This will give us a list of all of them. So what we're going to do then is we're going to loop through this to see what it is that we get as an output. And what we get is that original post. We get all of it. Let me make that a little bigger. So what this loop did is it went through each element that was saved in the list, and it printed out the text in those particular web elements. We can very quickly check. Let's see, it starts with Happy Monday, guys, which we can see up here, just at the start. It does find that smaller text afterwards, where they're saying it's not my week to post these. Apparently there's a schedule for that with the moderators or something. Either way, we see that we get the start of the post. If we scroll down, just to make sure that we get all of it, we end with, I may or may not mark this thread, not safe for work, because let's not kid ourselves. Like I said, Reddit can get weird about things. And we find this here at the very bottom. So it looks like we're getting the whole thing here, which is nice. So now that we've checked in to see what we're getting, because we looped through it, kind of messes up the list. So let's redefine it. And then like we did before, where we got the list of links, we're going to create an empty list to put all of the P elements into. And this is important because we're going to put them in there as strings rather than web elements. So we make the empty list, and then we run this loop where we're going through each element in the list. And we are, the list is right here, original post text list, it's empty. What we're doing is we are appending things to that. So we're just adding them to the list. And what we're adding is each element in, each P element, the text of that P element as a string. So we run that. And we're not quite done yet, because what we really want is we really want this to be just one string that we can save. So we will create an empty string variable titled original post text string. We will loop through the list, and we will add each element of that list to our empty string. And what that will give us is this, just a nice single string of all the data that we want in this original post. So now it's getting on a little bit. Suffice to say, we do something very similar for the comments, where we find the first comment and the username of the first comment, when it was posted. We go through that with just the first comment. And let's fast forward a little bit so that I can get to the newspaper articles as well. The important part here is, so these are the things that we found in the original post. We found the original poster, which is a string variable. We found the title. We found the time, then as an integer. The units, so is this days, is this years, is it months? We found the units. We found the text, which was that string that we created at the end there. Now what we're doing is we're figuring out, okay, so what is the current day? We can use that with the time units and time numeric to figure out when this was originally posted. So we're going to define what the date is today. Which is very simple to do with the package that we imported. You can just define a variable, current date equals date.today, which gives us that, datetime.date. It is 2020, November 20th day. This is very, very easy to work with. You can actually just subtract 8 from this, And then this variable would be 2020 11 12. It's very convenient. The last thing that we'll do is we will define a variable titled original post positive to just denote that this was the first post, and then reply negative as 0, just to tell us that this was not a reply. And I like to have both of these here just for double checking. If both are 1, something weird happened in the data somewhere. If both are 0, something weird happened. So I like to have them both. This works with smaller data sets. If you're working with something huge in the millions of observations or larger than that, having additional columns like this could eventually end up being a bad thing. But for the data sets of the sizes that we usually work with, it's not so bad. Here, we went through the similar process with the comments. We have variables for each of those. And what we will then do is we'll start using pandas here. And this is a very simple application of pandas, which is, again, the spreadsheet and data management package. And this right here is how you create a data frame, how you create a spreadsheet. This is one of the ways to do it. So what this code is doing is it's creating a spreadsheet titled Reddit_Kia using pandas.dataframe. So it is creating a data frame using pandas. And then each of these things is a column. This first one is for username. And we're creating a column titled username. This right here is telling Python what type of column this is, what type of data is going to be contained in this. Because it's a username, we want it to be strings, which is text. The next one is the original post title. We want this to, again, be string. Here, post time numeric, which we would use for original post time numeric. This is an integer. We want this to be a number so that we can deal with it very, very simply and edit the post times. Post time units, this is, again, in strings. Current date, we want this to be a date time variable. Here is the post text. We would use the, where was that? Original post text string. We put that here, so we want that to be a string. And then finally, original post, we want to be an integer because that's just a 0, 1. I think there are actually better variables to use, but for our data size, it doesn't actually matter that much for just binary variables. And then reply, again, binary, we're just going to call it an integer, 0, 1. So if we run that, it creates our data frame. And then this here is the text, is the code to actually apply all of our information to that data frame. And what's important about this is that notice how all of the things here are variables. Everything here is a variable. This is something that we can do within a loop. So if we are looping through each thread in this forum, we can define the variable original poster, and then we can input that into the data frame. We can input original post title, post time numeric, post time units. All of these are variables that we can assign to the data frame within a loop, which is very convenient because that means that we don't have to do it ourselves. We just write the code and then we can let it run. The way that this is working is we're telling pandas to do all of this by with particular syntax. And again, we're running a little slow today. Sorry about that. And the important part is that this is going in order. So whatever it is we put here is going to the first column. This is the second column. This is the third column, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth. And what this will be doing is it will be putting a new on the bottom of the data frame for each of those columns. It's just appending to the end. We do that here for each of the replies, or at least for the first reply. And when, if we turn this into an actual scraping project, we would have this set up in a loop where it would look at every thread, get the first original post, and then it would go through all of the information of the original post. Then it would scrape all of the information of each reply. We can, using this, connect them all together, maintain the relationships between each of the parts that we're interested in. If it's a reply, what's the original post it's connected to? And we can automate this to happen every day to keep track of the top 10 threads on Reddit in this particular subreddit every single day. One thing that I wanted to mention at the end is that so this gets a lot more complex once you start going to different threads. And the reason that I want to mention this is that this is an iterative process just by its nature. As you are creating your web scraping code, you're going to run into weirdness with it. For example, if you look at the usernames here, you'll see that there's a username and then there's some text after it. That actually messes with the regular expressions that we use. So you have to go back to your code and you have to make sure that it works for all these little exceptions. The second thing that I wanted to mention that I don't think we've actually mentioned yet is I wanted to go back to these regular expressions. And what's really important about these is that nobody actually remembers them. Nobody remembers all of the rules for regular expressions and how to use them and what each of these particular things mean. It is normal to look up these rules and how to use them and what they mean as you go. For example, as I was writing this, I couldn't actually remember what particular characters and stuff for regular expressions mean. So I looked up a Python regular expression cheat sheet. And this gives you a nice handy dandy list where you can, that you can reference as you're working on regular expressions. What do particular things mean? How do you find particular things? This is a normal part of coding and writing code. That feeling that you have when you go back and look at homework that you did 4 years ago, or a paper you wrote a few years ago where you're looking at it and you go, I have no idea what this means. That's really common for code too. If you go back and look at code you wrote a year ago, half of it's going to be totally incomprehensible until you start looking it up again. And this process of looking it up and refiguring it out is very, very normal. So if, as you're starting to look at web scraping and look at pandas or regular expressions, it's very, very normal to look things up. And it's very, very normal to go over something and then forget it and then have to look it up again. So that's one thing that I wanted to mention about that. So the next thing that I wanted to go over, and we'll switch gears a little bit, is the code to scrape from ProQuest. And we don't have time to go over all of the details, since this took a little longer to explain than I thought it would. But what I would like to show you is the basic structure of it. Because the basic structure of the ProQuest scraping is really, really useful to be familiar with. In that there is a particular way that I believe we all learned from Neil that we go about this. So I'm going to maximize this. And also just to describe what's in here, I went back over through the code from the workshop I did about a month ago. And I put all of the sort of code into functions to show you what that looks like. And went through an example of logging into ProQuest, what code to do this that's pretty stable and really works looks like. I put the login in a function, the advanced search in a function. So there's examples of all these in here. But what I really wanted to show you is that we go down here. All this leads up to downloading a particular document. Now, let me find that. Let me open this up. So the way that we all scrape from ProQuest is what you fundamentally want to do is you want to get a list first of all the articles and all of their metadata. What you don't want to do is loop through every page one by one and try and access the articles there. You want to get the big spreadsheet, which we went through last time and I do in this code. And what the spreadsheet does is it gives you all of the metadata of the newspaper articles that you're interested in, or at least that your search string gives you. But it does not give you the full text of the newspaper articles, if that's what you're interested in. However, we can use this to find the full text, because what these have is they have stable links, similar to how we went through the stable links to particular threads on Reddit. You download stable links to every article that you want. So for example, this right here, this brings us, every time that we put this in our search bar, this will bring us to the same link. And if we do this in Selenium, or actually let's just do it here. You'll have to log in to do it. Just a second. Logging in my Firefox. So what the stable link will bring you to is a web page that looks like this. So we have all of the metadata already. And here, by following that stable link, we can find the full text. This is really, really important to be familiar with because this is infinitely easier than many of the other ways of scraping these databases. All we have to do now is with this, we can just scrape that full text, put a new column on the end here, and then just paste it in. We have all of this metadata attached, and those stable links do not expire. They always work, or at least until ProQuest changes something drastic. I've never seen them do that, or they shut down, which they won't. This is the way that if you are trying to scrape newspaper articles, this is the format you really want to be doing it in. So I wanted to make sure that we went over that very briefly with the time we had left. and we are just about to hit 4. So I think I'll leave it there. Any questions or comments or questions about the code or life generally?
Well, if there are no questions, I think we can wrap up by looking ahead to next semester a little bit. So thanks everybody for turning out this semester. It's been a lot of fun to kind of go through these workshops, and I've certainly learned a lot, which is always great. Next semester, what we're planning on is doing something similar with blending workshops with research presentations and graduate student presentations. So we have one outside speaker lined up for next semester, David Malamed from Ohio State. On top of that, we're planning right now between 3 and 4 workshops on using social media data, collecting social media data using Twitter APIs, and analyzing social media data such as text analysis and other natural language processing algorithms. I can't remember whether it's Todd or Will, but one of our co-organizers is also going to give a research presentation. And right now what we would like to do is solicit from the group for other research in progress type presentations. And especially what we want to emphasize is that if you guys have projects in the works that you want feedback on, that's great. But also if you just have ideas that are very much in the early stages and you're kind of just playing around with maybe using some type of computational method and you want feedback from folks, that's actually a great thing to bring to us. And we really want to encourage that type of thing because we think this type of group, you know, you're going to get your substantive feedback from the other working groups. And so if you're really curious about using the method, it's a great place to brainstorm possible data sources, measurement strategies, analysis strategies, all those things when it's really at its kind of formative stages. So if you have those ideas, please, please, please shoot Todd, me, or Will an email, and we can figure out a time for you guys to get some feedback next semester. Thumbs up. Yeah. Okay. Any final thoughts, Todd, Will, Lou, anybody else you want to say anything before we wrap up here?
Sure. So first thing I'd like to say is thanks for sticking it out with us as we've been figuring out what this workshop could look like and the directions to go in, and as we've been trying to figure out how this could actually be useful. So thanks for just sort of being here through the process. And the hope is that we can really keep this going and turn this into something that's sort of institutionalized rather than a just sort of passion project of the people who are sort of trying to run it. Because we sort of felt that there's a lot of